Ooh, this is a spicy one. I feel personally attacked by this one.
Don't be personally attacked.
You can probably get like 100 subscribers for like $1 at this point. Some people open certain newsletters for the person. Doesn't matter what the title is, they're just going to open it regardless. But until that point, you should never spend money on paid ads. Sorry, Matt McGarry, I say no.
Chenell is getting spicy. I love it.
I cannot wait for the comments on this one because I know somebody's going to be like, but wait, I did it and I do it every week and I get all these amazing results.
I'm not going to argue with you.
You're allowed to if you want.
No, I can't.
This is like the spiciest newsletter thing right now. This is like worse than politics at this point.
Hey, welcome back to the Growth in Reverse podcast. My name is Dylan.
And I'm Chenell.
And we are back with another episode for you guys today. What we're going to talk about in this episode, specifically giving some sort of spicy takes on some maybe polarizing topics in the newsletter space. We're going to cover a few things today that we've heard people say, you should 100% do this or you should 100% not do this. And I think the great thing here with this conversation is we're going to provide a bit more nuance to the, black or white, yes or no, do this, don't do this kind of conversation. And I think it's going to be an interesting chat about a few things that people often ask yourself, myself, or just generally online about what they should or shouldn't be doing with their newsletters.
Yeah, I like this topic. It was a good one. These are definitely questions I get all the time. And people are always looking for a do this, don't do that. And there's no middle ground. And I'm like, but there's always a middle ground. It's not that simple.
We're going to start off with a bit of probably one of the spicier, I guess, takes in the newsletter space where I've seen people, bash this strategy and people just like say, I wouldn't have grown my newsletter at all if it wasn't for this strategy to some degree. So the first one is, should I or shouldn't I use lead magnets for my newsletter? Quickly, off the top of your head, what is your very first initial reaction to that question?
It depends.
Yeah, I love it. The nuance has started already. How about I give a spicier yes, you should?
Yeah, you definitely picked the spiciest one to start with, for sure.
I know. We're coming out of the gate swinging.
Yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it's definitely I would lean towards yes with a bunch of caveats in there, but yeah, I'll let you go rant on this one if you want.
Sure. Well, I'll provide some caveats as well. So one thing I was thinking of when I was preparing for this episode and thinking about lead magnets and who it might work for and who it might not work for, I think generally for most newsletter creators and most verticals, a lead magnet can work. But I think when we're talking about a newsletter style that's kind of like a daily news broadcast, so like, you think of the 1440s and the morning brews, those types of newsletters, I don't necessarily see a lead magnet being super useful, or I don't really know how you would prep a lead magnet for that kind of a newsletter. So I think there's definitely some types of newsletters that it would not work great for. That being said, I think there are a lot of newsletters that would work great for. You've leveraged the strategy. I leveraged this strategy. And before we say, yes, create a lead magnet and send it to everyone and grow your newsletter that way, I think there's a few caveats we should cover. And one is that you can't just create a lead magnet and send it out and hope that everybody who downloads it is going to be into your content. You have to be strategic and obviously make sure the content in the lead magnet is really nicely aligned with the content that you're going to be providing. You don't want to have a super generic, say, checklist or PDF template, whatever it might be. Doesn't really provide any value to your actual newsletter. It has nothing to do with your newsletter if it's super vague or general, and then your newsletter is like super focused and really niche. So that's kind of my first caveat. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, 100% agree. I think this is where most people think about when they say like don't do a lead magnet, because they're thinking about the person that's creating a random checklist just to get people on the email list, and then it has nothing to do with their actual content they're sending every week. Because it's top of mind, I recently did the deep dive on Justin Moore, and he gives away like extra sponsorship data in his email, and his whole premise of his email list is helping you get more sponsors. So that is super related. However, when he first started his creator business online, he was trying to do all kinds of stuff, and he was giving away like a finance checklist, like end of year tax stuff. And finance wasn't even like his bread and butter of what he was talking about. It was just some side benefit that people could use. So It was not related. It didn't do as well. And he said he felt like he was just creating tens and tens of lead magnets that weren't actually getting him subscribers or the right subscribers. There's definitely nuance there.
There is. And I think one other thing is when people think of lead magnets, they just think like this specific, like, PDF download checklist. But lead magnets can be in all shapes and sizes. You've done, I think, 5 or 6 different deep dives where lead magnets have been like a really substantial strategy for growth for some of these creators who have 50,000 plus subscribers. And one that I thought was interesting was David Perel. David was using a lead magnet in the beginning, and he went from using like a PDF style type of lead magnet, and then he pivoted to creating an email course, basically a free email course for his lead magnet, and that seemed to be working well. And then eventually he kind of stopped doing that for a bit, and then he went back to them again. So I think you can see how with lead magnets, you definitely need to test them and see what is working. Don't just try one thing and write it off as, lead magnets don't work for me. Well, maybe they don't, but maybe you just need to try something new or something different too.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the really smart things he did was he was using an email course too. He wasn't just using a PDF giveaway. I really like the email course format for a lead magnet because you're kind of building that habit with your readers of getting them to open emails regularly. So that's a really good way to kind of tease people into your content, get them used to opening your emails versus a PDF where they download it once, it lives on their computer and they never open it again.
I think the nice thing too with an email course is you can update it pretty easily without having to resend it to people. With a PDF, it's pretty static. There's not a lot of, you can't really change it once people have downloaded it. So I know my first lead magnet was like a 20-page PDF sort of thing about how to start on Substack back when I was using Substack, and it did well, and it helped grow my newsletter and my audience, and it was very related to what I was talking about. But then about a year and a bit later, I created an email course because I'm writing about newsletters and I'm writing a newsletter, and I think an email course would probably get people into that habit, like you said, of seeing me in their inbox, opening my content, finding some value in it, and then staying on my email list as well.
Yeah, I like it.
Let's run through a few other quick examples of some of the deep dives you've done. Like Eric Partaker, for example, he did a free book as a lead magnet for his newsletter, which is like a ton of value. Getting people on your list, it's a lot of work, but that's one thing that really drove a lot of success for him.
The free book that Eric was giving away, I really actually liked that one because he was able to use that and take that one piece of content and he promoted that everywhere. He was on so many podcasts and I listened to most of them. It was a lot of research on that one, but in every single podcast, he talked about the same book and it was like his signature book and it led people into the rest of his like product line up, if you will. But it was just super smart. It's like a lead magnet to get people on the email list, but it's also something that drives people directly into the rest of your product suite. So
that is cool. That reminds me actually a lot of Michael Hauk. He used a term called like a Trojan horse basically into your business. So you leverage an asset like that, and it basically gets people into your ecosystem and everything you have to offer, products, services, and all that. So I really think that's smart, and a lot of people could be doing a lot more of that. Shall we move on to the next topic, or do you have any final closing thoughts on lead magnets?
No, we could probably do a whole episode on lead magnets. So let's save it for that.
Okay. Here's another sort of spicy topic. Should you or shouldn't you use double opt-in? And maybe we should make it clear what we're talking about when we say double opt-in.
So essentially double opt-in is when you essentially set it up on the back end with your email service provider where somebody has to click a specific button or a link to actually get added to your email list. Now, it seems pretty straightforward, but the problem with it is if someone misses that email or that email goes to spam, they're never going to get any of your other emails because the email service provider essentially says, well, that person didn't actually want this. We're not going to send them anything else. So unfortunately, that really can reduce the number of actual subscribers you get. So I think we both have a similar take on this, which is create your own double opt-in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you want to explain how that works?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I hear Eminem in my head, you only get one shot. Do not miss your chance to blow it. Like you get this one shot at getting in people's inboxes with a double opt-in from your ESP provider, I should say. So if people don't actually click on that confirmation email, if it goes into their spam, if it gets buried in the promotions tab or just buried in their inbox and they, don't get around to opening it and clicking in it, that was your one shot. And you don't have the opportunity to reach out to them again. So that's why I like the idea of creating your own version of double opt-in where basically anybody that subscribes on your sign-up form is already confirmed. They're on your list. You can reach out to them more than once. And then you can create your own, basically in your welcome sequence, you basically say, thanks for subscribing to my newsletter. Just confirm that you actually want to receive this click here, whatever the action you want them to take is, so that you can confirm that they're there. This might be something you may want to do, at least make sure that they opt in themselves. I don't know what your take on this, Chanel, is, but my thought is if people are organically finding your content and subscribing on your homepage and that sort of thing, quite likely they probably are willing and happy to subscribe, and maybe they don't necessarily need that confirmation email as well. Whereas people who are getting subscribers via maybe lead magnets, or maybe they're in a referral program, or they're getting recommendations, Kids Creator Network or through Beehive, and these people are ending up on their email lists and they don't necessarily know why they're on their list. They forget that they checked the box in the to subscribe. I think those are more maybe the people that you'd really want to create that double opt-in experience for on your end.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a really good point. I actually recently had to turn on double opt-in, like the real one, because I was getting, my homepage was getting like blasted with some false emails, and they were all like yahoo.com addresses from like Britain somewhere. So it was
Interesting.
pretty interesting. So I actually had to turn it on. So my growth slowed quite a bit on that, but it seems like those people are a lot more engaged anyway. So pluses and minuses of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do definitely prefer having like that false double opt-in. I don't even want to call it false double opt-in. We should come up with a name for this, but I feel like it's going to come up multiple times.
Like a personalized double opt-in or a customized double opt-in, where you're not just at the whim of your ESP.
Yeah, for sure.
You have more control. And I think there's just maybe a shout to Matt McGarry, who he's worked with a lot of big newsletters and runs strategy for them, and he's shared that like basically 20 to 40% of your subscribers will be lost to double opt-in. I call it double opt-in purgatory, because they're really just kind of sitting in this purgatory where they subscribed and never actually confirmed, and you can't do anything about it. So 20 to 40% is pretty significant. And that's, that range is probably actually quite wider than that. But yeah, I think if you consider the ramifications of not being able to email 4 out of every 10 of your subscribers who've actually signed up for your newsletter, that really sucks.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last thing we should mention about double opt-in. I was doing just a newsletter breakdown for another private community a few weeks ago, and they were using double opt-in. It was a newsletter based in Germany, and I said, turn off your double opt-in, try this, like your own version of double opt-in essentially. And what I was told is in Germany, it's actually mandatory to have double opt-in. So you just want to make sure that if your country, you might not be able to because of your location, or if there's like strict regulations around single and double opt-in for newsletters or email, you want to make sure that you're considering that too.
Yeah, super smart to add in there, because there are some different restrictions around the world. So
cool. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So should you clean your email list, or is there no point?
ooh, this is a spicy one. We actually had this kind of an off-topic conversation in the community a couple of weeks back, I think. And some people were like, well, I'm on Substack, so I can't really clean my list. So what do you want me to do? And I'm like, well, that's true, but that kind of stinks for like your sponsors or people that you're actually trying to get good results for. I don't know. It's an interesting take, because in my head, I'm like, yeah, you clean your list. That's a thing. Why wouldn't you? But there are some spots where you can't. So
I think the other thing that comes to mind is like your newsletter's growing, engagement's the same, then maybe you don't need to clean your list. Maybe you're doing everything okay. People are unsubscribing when they need to or want to, and everybody else who's subscribed is, opening your newsletter. I guess you could argue that maybe cleaning your list, you're actually only hurting yourself, because you're deleting people who you may have the chance to reach out to in the future, and or who may just not be interested in your product at this time, or your service, or your whatever your content is. So I think that was one of the arguments that was kind of made too in the community, was that like, well, you're just deleting subscribers who actually might be engaged at some point.
one of the things I always think about with this is the Gist, the newsletter. It's like the women's sports newsletter.
Yeah.
They actually talked about how, because it's so dependent on the sports seasons and the time of year, that instead of actually unsubscribing people, they will put them into separate segments and say, okay, we're going to come back to these people when NFL season restarts, because, they're kind of not paying attention right now, but we don't want to unsubscribe them because at one point they were interested. So if you do have kind of like an audience that might be interested at one point of the year, but not all points of the year, it could make sense to kind of like mute them for a little bit, for lack of a better word, and come back to them in a couple months. Whether that's like Matt Giovanisi, he runs Swim University. He talks about pool care. People aren't really paying attention to their pool in December necessarily.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
necessarily want to be sending emails like that. But yeah, that one comes to mind as well.
That's a good point. I guess we should also like maybe be a little bit more nuanced on this. When we say clean your list, like don't just delete subscribers or unsubscribe subscribers. Like make sure you are either setting up an automation where every time somebody hasn't opened or engaged with an email in 30, 60, 90 days, whatever you decide is a sufficient amount of time, you're basically doing a re-engagement sequence just to make sure that they are or are not engaged. I know Chanel, you can speak for this too, because I think you don't turn on images when in your inbox. So people often assume that you're not opening their emails when in fact you are, and you get a lot of these calls. And I know they're a bit annoying, right? But at the same time, on your end, you're doing your due diligence as a newsletter operator, making sure that you're not just unsubscribing a whole bunch of people from your list who may or very well be enjoying your newsletter.
Yeah. I often get emails from people who are like, "Oh, I have 1,500 subscribers on my email list because I just cut half of them. Isn't that great? My open rate went up." And I'm like, please tell me you had like sent some emails out to them and like made sure that they actually weren't reading, because I did set
No.
up a re-engagement campaign once. Not that I've only used it once, but when I initially set it up, I got quite a few replies from people on services like hey.com. And they were
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, I actually read every single email, but hey.com just hides all of those tracking links."
Yeah.
So that's one example of that. I'm sure there are plenty of others. So you can't just like blindly delete people
Mm.
without like trying to make sure that you're actually ensuring that they aren't opening your emails.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that would be that's kind of like newsletter suicide a little bit, I think, to some
Yeah.
degree. You're just like you're jumping off the building thinking these people aren't engaged, but they very well are. The other thing I would consider too is when you can delete subscribers and you can unsubscribe subscribers, and I think there's definitely nuance there. I would never delete a subscriber. When you do that, you're deleting all of the data that comes with that subscriber of when they first subscribed, there any tags or segments they might have been in. So if they ever were to resubscribe, you'd basically be starting from scratch. And so I think I highly recommend you to unsubscribe them at the end of your sequence or whatever you choose to do there. If they truly are not engaged, unsubscribe them, have your sequence unsubscribe them automatically. Do not delete subscribers. And most ESPs will not charge you for those unsubscribed subscribers.
That's a good point. Okay, so this next one, I wanted to clarify with you because you're asking, should you push people to your website in your newsletter or just publish everything in the newsletter? I feel personally attacked by this one.
Don't be personally attacked. I mean, there's definitely a few things around this because if for some reason you've not read Chanel's newsletter, you can explain how you do it, but essentially you push people to your website.
Yeah, so I
Yeah,
have, a little blurb about the longer form article, and then I have a button that says keep reading or go visit the full article. Because I mean, oftentimes these are like 3 to 4,000 word posts, and like Gmail would definitely clip that email,
yeah.
especially with all like the screenshots and everything that I have in there. So yeah, so that's how I started, and I just kept doing it. And so that's how I do it. I get emails at least once a week asking why I don't just publish the full article in there. And so like now I have just a little snippet that I just paste into those
Oh, I love
emails and
it.
reply because it's like probably the most common question I get.
That is too funny. Okay, so
Yeah.
this is definitely not an attack on you. I wanted to basically highlight this because I felt this as well when I was writing my newsletter. When I was doing long articles, I'm like, should I just publish the whole thing in the newsletter and then let people read it all there, or should I push them over to my website? And there's various reasons to change this. So when I very first started, I was on Substack, and you kind of had to share everything in the Substack newsletter because that was the experience. You could also read it on the site, but that was a general experience. I didn't have a website, so that's how I used it. Eventually, I switched to ConvertKit, but I still didn't build a website. I was just pushing people to Medium, to my medium.com story, and I would share a friend link so they would be able to read it ungated. They wouldn't have to be a Medium member and pay that monthly fee. So you could read it for free, but I still didn't have a website. So I was basically getting people pushed over to a different platform. So yeah, not the best practice. I wouldn't necessarily recommend people doing that. And then eventually I finally built a website and kind of caved to the pressure of having my own website. And I was then doing what you did. I would do a tease of the article and basically say like, read the whole article on my website. So I think at that point, it can be personal preference, especially if you're not publishing 3 to 4,000 words per edition. If you want people to just stay in your inbox and or in their inboxes reading your article, then by all means. I'm probably tainted by my own reading preferences where I will often save a long article if I see it in my email, in my inbox. I'll save it for later. I'll want to save it for later. And if I just open it and close it and go back and think that I will read it later, I very rarely do.
Interesting. So you save the emails or the articles?
Well, I won't save if there's no option to read it on a browser or on a website. I will probably not read the whole thing, probably ever. So that's why I'm like, okay, let's at least host this somewhere so people can bookmark it, clip it, whatever they want to do with whatever tool they want, and they can come back to it later.
Yeah, 100%. That's
Yeah.
why I do it also.
How about SEO?
SEO is huge. I mean, but there's also there's the argument that could be made that Beehive hosts all of the full articles in the emails, but they also have them living on a website.
Mm-hmm.
So you could technically say that that's like the same thing. So, I mean, you do get the benefit of SEO with that. I don't feel like Beehive is the best platform for SEO necessarily, like over and above your own like WordPress or other website.
Yeah.
Things are changing. Google is changing. So who knows? Maybe that's going to swing in the other direction.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a good point to make too. Kit or ConvertKit, they also have kind of this hosting option, and Substack obviously as well. So there are ways to go about it even without your own website as well. But again, the argument might be, I know for the longest time, my Substack articles would rank higher. I posted the same one on Substack and on kind of my ConvertKit profile page, and they would rank higher on Substack for the longest time. It's not always the best play to rely on those platforms for SEO.
For sure. And if they end up changing like how the links are structured or anything like that can really damage your SEO ranking too. So
yeah, good point. Anything else to add on this topic?
No, I think we beat this one with a dead horse. Or yeah. Never mind. You can take that. You know what I was trying to say. Okay, this next one. Should you turn your newsletter into a paid newsletter? Ooh, spicy.
Should you or shouldn't you?
Again, it depends.
I'm going to say probably not. And that's coming from somebody who did consider running a paid newsletter and then thought, I feel like this is like I'm building my own prison, so to speak, because I feel the pressure of both creating something that's worth paying for and then having to create that, not whenever I'm, feeling like inspired to create it, but because I have to create it. I'm a slave now to this subscription and these people who are subscribing. So for me, it was less about like the financial gain that could come from it, but more of like a deterrent of like not wanting this to be something that I am a slave to. So I think you could structure, your subscription to be not necessarily just content all the time. But for me, that was where I was like, no, I do not want to do this. And if you're considering it, you should just, I'm not saying it's not for you, because there's obviously, your Growth in Reverse was inspired by a paid newsletter and somebody making a lot of money with a paid newsletter. It's doable and it can be done, but you just have to consider the ramifications of going down that road.
I think there is a place for it. I mean, obviously Lenny's newsletter, like we cannot not talk about that. Man's making millions of dollars a year from a paid newsletter. However, was he early and at the right moment? And is it still a viable option? I don't know. But I mean, they're also, Stratechery, again, early. His brain is insane. Like that's, if somebody's, like if you're able to put out that much content that like the guy from Stratechery is able to.
Ben Thompson.
And at the same like depth and level and consistency, he's been doing it for like decade almost.
Yeah. And he publishes pretty regular. It's almost a 5-day a week.
Yeah.
Or pretty more than just once a week kind of thing, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
But also you have to think like these are B2B, either in depth or the person writing them has like extreme amounts of experience in the space.
Yeah.
So I don't think it probably works for just like a random person's newsletter, but I don't know. There is a place for it.
There is. I think you called out expertise essentially. Like if you're an expert in a field, you could probably get away with it. It's going to be a little bit harder to build. You'll probably need a free tier to at least get initial subscribers, get some traction there. So you have a free tier and then a paid tier. That's usually the most common way people do it. But probably advise against just gating your whole newsletter or all of your content with a paid subscription. I think Lenny's now, I just actually was checking. Lenny's newsletter is gated to, you get one free email a month. And he's got 3 other tiers, which I found interesting. We'll maybe throw it on the screen for people to see, but essentially he has these 4 different tiers of subscription model. Of course, one of them is free. and the other ones are monthly, annually, and then the I can expense this category. And basically, you
Mhm.
can fill in how much you want to pay as a minimum of, I think it was $216 a year. And then you could just like put in, choose your amount that you want to pay. And I love how he's just basically calling out, like, oh, yeah, I could, pay for this and I can expense it.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to call it the B2B side of things,
Yeah.
because I think that's just a big piece of this. The other thing I do want to caveat is like I see a lot of creators, they're like, I hit 1,000 subscribers, I'm gonna go paid. And I'm like, ooh, you're really capping your growth once you do that. So I would almost like just make sure you're hitting exit velocity before you actually put up that paywall, because you can kind of see it in some of these growth trajectories. It like kind of slows down some things. So just make sure you've hit that escape velocity before you do that.
Yeah, and I think the paid subscription, people see the dollar signs too with it, and see people like Lenny and Mario and Ben Thompson, and think I can make lots of money or enough at least to support myself to write this. But I think paid subscription should just be looked at least in the short term, as more of like a way to subsidize some revenue. It shouldn't be. I don't think you're. I would be impressed if you could make it like your main revenue stream from the beginning. I think there's other ways you could do it, and paid subscription could be like a portion of your revenue. I wouldn't want people to see what other people are doing, like the people I mentioned, and be like, oh, I'll make six figures in next year with a paid subscription model.
Yeah. I think the other thing to call out is like Lenny's paid portion of this is not just content. Like he has a
Hmm.
community, he has all this
Hmm.
other stuff included. And I actually was talking to somebody named Jeff at a conference I guess it was a while ago, 6+ months ago. But he was like, should I start a paid newsletter or should I start a paid community? And I was like, in my view, they're the same thing. Like there is a world in which you can equate them in your mind of like, my paid newsletter includes community, it includes all this other stuff. But most people do think of paid newsletter as just like a Substack where like part of it's paid, part of it's free. That's it, just
Yeah,
content. So, I mean, there are different takes on that as well. But yeah, this is definitely a nuanced discussion.
it is. I do like the model of providing. Back when I was at Sparkloop, we chatted with a guy. I think his name was Eric, and he ran a newsletter about basically ideas that were getting really popular on Google Trends. And so what he did
Yeah.
was he'd provide a free version of that newsletter where he'd like, here are three business ideas, or one topic that's like kind of exploding on Google Trends, and here are three different businesses you could do. And so he'd give you kind of like the basics around it, and then he said, subscribe to my paid tier, and I'll give you like way more in-depth strategy of how you could really actually go about doing this and how I would do it if I was to build out this business. And so
Yeah.
I think when you can offer that level of detail or that extra tier of information, education, support, that's where you can really drive some value for your paid subscription as well. Anything else to add?
No, I think I mean, all of these we could go on for hours with
We
each
could.
one. So,
Yes.
so this next one is should I bother testing my subject lines? So within a bunch of tools like Beehive and ConvertKit, at least you are able to do like an A/B test of different subject lines. I know with Beehive you can actually do, I think, ABC testing and do even more subject lines.
You can do four.
Oh, four.
Yeah.
Okay, stand corrected.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Maybe more
interesting.
even, but I've seen people test four and show the results on Twitter and stuff like that. So shout out
Cool.
to Michael over at Body Brain. He does that all the time.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, this one is tricky because I think some people open certain newsletters for the person. Doesn't matter what the title is, they're just going to open it regardless. So I don't think A/B testing matters as much in those cases. However, when you're just starting, you're getting off the ground, I think it can be an interesting way to get more opens, especially when people are just like building trust with you. At this point, when I test my subject lines, I usually don't actually see that big of a difference. Like most of
Yeah.
the time it's like 0.02% different. And I'm like, was that worth the extra 3 hours of waiting for people to get this in their inbox? Probably
Yeah.
not.
No, I
So,
agree. I think the trade-off is it can definitely be worth it in some cases. And I think when you are doing maybe a product launch, or you're really optimizing for, that like X amount of people, if X amount of people open, we'll get X amount of conversions, and like you've really kind of figured out this strategy for launching a product, then I could see it definitely being useful. You want to optimize kind of every step of that process. But for a weekly newsletter, or even a few times a week newsletter, daily newsletter even. So unless you're actually testing a specific element, I would say, of that subject line, I think it might be a waste of time. An example of that is I saw somebody asking, which of these subject lines is better, again, also on Twitter. And they had, 4 different versions, and they were kind of like 4 very different versions of the subject line. And I'm kind of like, well, even if you pick a winner, it doesn't really tell you anything about the results, right? Because there's not like one omitted a certain word, or like for this one, it was property values. So it was like one of them had property values in it, and the other 3 didn't. Kind of like it just my whole thing with testing subject lines is test things that you can actually get data back from. Like, oh, when I shared for your newsletter example, Chenell, if you shared that somebody had $500,000 in revenue, if you took that out of the subject line, probably the A/B test that had that $500,000 revenue in it would probably win. Whereas if somebody's just testing different sort of random ideas in their subject line, I think that's where this feels pointless to me.
Actually, I really wish that Kit would let you A/B test your welcome emails and your welcome sequences, because those are the emails that really can make a big difference, especially over time. Whereas a one-off send is like you said, unless you're learning something specific about like different verbiage that you can use moving forward, it's not going to make as big of a difference. However, with the welcome emails, the welcome sequences, you can absolutely like make headway on that kind of thing. But
yeah,
I think the only time I've really successfully or been happy with the A/B testing results was like how to get more newsletter subscribers versus how to grow your email list, and like seeing which one actually performed better. So I don't know. I think it's just interesting to kind of test those verbiage.
Yeah.
I don't even know what I was saying there. We're
Those
like
words,
killing this one today, Dylan.
I know, right? I know what you mean though. Like you tested basically the term email newsletters or your email list versus newsletters, right? And see which one resonated more with your audience. And that's something, especially if you're in the beginning, you're trying to figure out what people are interested in or catering to, or what kind of terms they like. That's where I think A/B testing can work really well. But if you're just kind of throwing 3 or 4, or even just 2 different email subject lines that are totally different, and you can't really extrapolate anything from the results, except that oh, this one was a little bit more popular, so it's going to all the inboxes after my 2-hour, 3-hour window. Like, yeah, that's a bonus, I guess. But at the end of the day, you're still back to the drawing board when you go to send your next email. You're like, I don't know, I'm going to throw 2 more subject lines at the wall and see which one wins. I think there should be a way to extrapolate some data from the results, and then use that going forward to just keep improving your subject lines.
Yeah, I cannot wait for the comments on this one, because I know somebody's going to be like, but wait, I did it, and I do it every week, and I get all these amazing results. And it's like, that's awesome. But I think there is some nuance to whether it's actually beneficial or not.
I think that's why this episode's so fun, is because everything we say, somebody's going to have a counterpoint to it. And that's why this topic is perpetually interesting.
Yes.
Okay, so this next one is, should I have ads in my newsletter? This is usually more of a question for somebody who's just starting out. But I think there's a fear, an unfounded fear, that if you put an ad in your newsletter, then people are going to unsubscribe or not read it or never open your email again, or think you're an evil marketer, when that is not the case. You've talked about this in the past. Josh Spector has talked about this in the past, and I think you referenced him when you decided to kind of put ads in the newsletter as well, where it's like he just ran a poll saying, would you like ads in my newsletter, or would you not like ads? And would you be interested in running an ad in my newsletter to the X amount of subscribers I have? And I think he was pretty surprised at the results. And there was only a small fraction of people who are basically like, no, do not put ads in the newsletter. I'll leave it there, because I think, like I said, you referenced this in the past. So what is your take on this one?
Yeah, I think the only reason you wouldn't want to put ads in your newsletter is if that is never going to be a monetization strategy that you want. Like if you have this signature product that you're trying to sell, and that's the only thing you want to make money from, great. Don't put ads in your newsletter. But if you're more on like the traditional newsletter side of things, where, you eventually want to have sponsors in your newsletter to supplement your income and like make sure that you're providing good content without actually charging people for it, I think that you should start earlier than you think you need to. And even if it comes down to you putting in an affiliate link for a product you use or something like that, you can use it as like a sponsored section, and just say like, hey, I use this product, here's my affiliate link, and have people sign up that way. And then they're getting used to having a sponsor in your newsletter. but you don't necessarily have to go try and sell the space before you do that. So
Totally. I think affiliates are like the lowest barrier to entry for almost everybody to kind of test out this whole sponsorship, advertising, kind of dipping your toe in that realm because yeah, it could be hard when you only have a few hundred subscribers. You're just starting out, even under 1,000 could be tricky to get a sponsor, and the work back and forth with it for maybe a $25, $50 sponsorship spot that may not drive the clicks and revenue that either you or the sponsor want. It's just a lot of work. And
yeah,
I think dipping your toe with affiliates is a really smart way to do it. I think there's one other point too to make about making sure that the advertiser and or sponsor is very aligned with your audience. It sounds like common sense, but I think it's worth repeating that like you don't just want to throw in anybody who's willing to pay you money to go in your newsletter. You want to make sure that there's actually going to be value there from the sponsor to your audience and vice versa.
100%. And we should probably do a whole podcast episode on how to do your sponsorships better.
We probably should. We probably should.
Okay, next. Should I use paid growth to grow my newsletter? I'll take this one.
Yes.
Because I have a background in paid ads, I would say not until you're able to find content audience fit to the point where you know that if you get a subscriber, you're making $3 on the back end, you're making $10 on the back end, or whatever that number is to allow you to say, okay, I can go to Facebook ads or meta ads or whatever you want to call it. I can spend up to $5 to get a subscriber and I know I will break even and or make money. But until that point, you should never spend money on paid ads. And I will say that over and over again. Sorry, Matt McGarry, I say no.
Chenell is getting spicy. I love it. I love it. We're not. This is a not a non-nuanced take. One of the rare non-nuanced takes we've had in this episode.
I'm sure there's a nuance to it, but I feel like for the most
I don't know
part,
if there is.
Smaller creators should not be using paid ads until they have that.
One way you could, I guess, look at it. What's your take on this? If you were driving, say, a little bit of revenue with your newsletter, you didn't figure out all of your customer lifetime value numbers and all that sort of stuff yet, but let's say you're making like $100 a month with your newsletter, however that revenue is coming in. What if you just reinvested that into growth?
I would still argue that it's probably a waste of money until you figure out is the content that you're already creating something people want to read every week, and they're not just going to unsubscribe after like a day. B, I don't know. I mean, I do think reinvesting is great. Like it's a great strategy, but I just want to make sure you're spending that money wisely.
Yeah, that's smart. I think the other thing you'd want to strongly consider is that you have the rest of the subscriber experience really, really nailed down. Like landing page needs to be super good if you're paying to get people to go to it. The after you subscribes experience, the thank you page, the almost there page, the confirmation emails, the welcome sequence, like that really needs to be buttoned down, optimized, whatever word you want to use to make sure that any money you're spending to get that subscriber they're going to have basically the best chance of engaging, signing up, and staying subscribed.
I would say probably the only caveat, I guess I will backtrack here a little bit, is if you have an unlimited budget because you've made millions in another venture and you're just like, well, I'm going to figure this out one way or another. Let me just get as many subscribers as possible. Great. More power to you.
Ollie Richards comes to mind. Is that who's bouncing around in your head there?
Definitely not, but that is a good example. But also like if you're already like a semi-respected celebrity in your space or have tons of experience and people are just going to follow you because it's you, sure, go spend money. But if you're a new creator, you're testing out this new venture, you don't know if you want to stick with it, I would not spend money on paid ads.
I'm not going to argue with you.
You're allowed to if you want.
No, I can't. I would 100% agree. So I'm in the same boat, which maybe doesn't make for the most entertaining episode, but for this one, I'm not going to argue with you.
We'll have Matt McGarry come on and tell us otherwise. But
hey, let's do it. I love debating stuff like this because quite often I will be validated maybe in some things that I've thought, but also very exposed to things that I hadn't been and different variables and different experiences are like, no, this is the way you have to do it. And someone's like, actually, I really was very successful at doing it the opposite way. And you go, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way. So yeah, I think there's as long as the debates are friendly and respectful, then I'm all for it.
I keep bringing up Matt. He's a great person. I respect him a lot. I just say that because I feel like a lot of people, especially in the newsletter space, look to him as like, he's always saying run paid ads, like starting yesterday. So,
right.
that's why I bring him up. But I definitely
Yeah.
respect his opinion. So we'll have to get him on here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right, should we do a few more here? Some
Sure.
like rapid fiery ones.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. How about referral programs? They were all the rage about 2019, 2020. Morning Brew grew their newsletter in part on the back of a Morning Brew mug you would get if you recommended 5 friends. And so it was like referral programs are the way to grow your newsletter. Sparkloop was born out of this idea.
Mhm.
So should you use a referral program to grow your newsletter?
Sure. I think it's a good extra thing to have. I wouldn't go spending money on trying to like design mugs or shirts or anything, but if you
Mm,
can find a way to even give away a lead magnet via a referral program,
hmm
say, hey, refer one person and you get this awesome checklist that I put together. That's great. I think a lot of people used to look at this as like the way to grow your newsletter, whereas
Yeah.
I think it's more of like a extra type of thing.
Yep.
Like it's going to help you grow incrementally, but it's not going to be that one thing that, explodes your newsletter overnight.
I agree. I think the maybe a best practice, as much as I kind of hate that term for referral programs, is like make that first referral reward very easy to obtain or attain. So make it like 1 or 2 referrals as opposed to making it 5 or 10 to get your first reward, because that just kind of de-incentivizes people kind of right off the bat. Should you use paid recommendations widgets?
Paid. Okay. So why don't you explain what paid recommendation widgets
Sure.
are?
So if you've ever subscribed to a newsletter on Substack, a Beehive newsletter, a just about any newsletter these days, a ConvertKit based newsletter, you will quite often see this pop up appear saying, or you'll be taken to a new page where it says, "Hey, you should also check out, if you like my newsletter, you should also check out, XYZ different newsletters." That's one way that I know Lenny has even written about. He grew his newsletter on Substack, just like kind of skyrocketed back in 2022 when they launched that feature. And so other ESPs have kind of followed suit and created that functionality for their users. So kind of some debate around whether you should actually use this and grow your newsletter that way, or if you should use it and monetize your newsletter that way, because it's like a double-edged sword, right? You can use paid recommendations widgets to be featured in there to grow your newsletter, and you can also use the paid recommendation widgets to earn revenue for your newsletter. So I guess I wasn't clear on the question whether you should use them in one way or the other, but I'll just leave it open. Like, what do you think? Yes or no for both growing and earning?
I don't
Putting you
know.
on the
This is
spot.
like the spiciest. This is like the spiciest newsletter thing right now.
Oh,
This is like worse than politics at this point.
it's basically you're a Democrat or Republican when it comes to your take on this.
Yeah.
Essentially, you're one side or you're the other. There's no middle
So
ground.
I guess if we can explain the pros and the cons a little bit.
Sure. Okay, let's do it.
So I would say the pros to using a paid recommendation widget for monetization. So you're earning. If I were to put it up on mine and say, hey, you should subscribe to these 3, and I get paid for some of them if you subscribe. I think it's a low barrier cost to, or a low barrier way to actually earn a little bit of revenue.
Yeah.
I would say the frustrating piece to this side is that I think these platforms have gotten so, I'm going to say it, ridiculous with their like the things that they require from these subscribers. Like some people set these up and they could be like, okay, they have to open every single email I send for the next 365 days before you get paid your $3 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have to be from Texas, New York, or California. It's like crazy at this point. So this is why I have never, actually, I think I did it a little bit in the early days, but I have not since used a paid recommendation widget because it's just
to earn revenue.
to earn revenue. I do it for, it's almost like a swap with friends. Like I don't actually get paid for those, but I will swap with friends and have them recommend me and I recommend them. I think that's more of a, I don't know, it feels better to me to actually do that because I know the people I'm recommending, I don't know, they're just like good people. Their content's good. So I know I'm steering people in a good direction.
I like the reciprocal nature of it as well. It's smart.
I guess I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No,
but
I love it. I loved it. You're fiery. It was good. What about, okay, so what about for growth then? Should you use paid recommendations to grow your newsletter?
I mean, because of the ridiculous parameters you could put on them, sure, because you can probably get like 100 subscribers for like $1 at this point. And I'll be fair and say like I haven't looked at the back end because I'm not going to sit there and spend money to do this right now. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
Yeah, I've working for a business that this was one of their main offerings or features. It was really interesting to see how people were using them. I won't get into obviously too much detail, but you can definitely grow your newsletter to a path where you are weaning out, say, low quality subscribers, if you will, and only paying for the ones that actually engage. That being said, there's debate about how if those subscribers, if they're actually engaging, and I think like you really touched on the parameters that you need to fulfill for your subscriber to, run through. They got to click or they've got to open and they only have so much time to do it before you get paid like your $2 for that subscriber. It is to the point where it can be very also demotivating. Like we talked about earlier, it's like, I'm not really incentivized to share this newsletter because I know like I'm not going to actually get money sharing it when somebody subscribes. So yeah, I could see being both sides of the coin, but it's definitely a very interesting topic. Another episode we could probably go way deeper on.
Yeah. I mean, there's the argument that you're getting someone to sign. You've done all the hard work to get someone to sign up for your list. Why are you sending them to other people? They're essentially going to end up with 3, 4, 5 welcome emails at once, including yours. So why are they going to stick to your email? That's another whole rabbit hole to go down, but I don't know.
I don't think there's a limit to some of these platforms, how many you can put in your recommendations. So if somebody just says, yeah, subscribe to all of them, and then they could have basically their whole inbox is just all these welcome emails. So yeah, not the best experience for sure. And you're kind of cannibalizing, I guess, the attention that you could be getting all for yourself. So
yeah, I mean, there is a point to say that people have successfully grown their newsletter off of this, and I'm sure it works for some people really well. But there's way too much nuance for me at this point to jump in. So
that is fair. How about we just end on this one? Should I run giveaways to drive more subscribers?
Hold on, I'm going to go look at my stats for the one giveaway I did with a couple people. You can rant about this until then if you want.
I don't have a huge rant on giveaways. My rant would be, don't do it. Now, it would be funny if you pulled up your data and you're like, actually, this was really successful. But what I've heard anecdotally more so than anything from various newsletter operators is they run a giveaway, they get a whole bunch of subscribers right away. It looks good to them, to their bosses if they're doing this for a business. They're growing their newsletter, it's great. But then it's like, oh, our open rates have plummeted. We are now going into spam filters. We are getting a whole bunch of not even cold subscribers, but just everybody's unsubscribing. So our list went way up and now it's gone way back down again. And I think you're just incentivizing the wrong thing for subscribers at that point. So I think there's a way to do giveaways for sure that can benefit you and keep people engaged and on your email list. Rewarding them with a physical product that has nothing to do with, say, your business or your content is probably a bad way to go about it.
I did one giveaway. And this was a long time ago. So this was March of 2023. So I was
3 months in,
4 months in.
Yeah.
Way early days. Initially from that, what we did, it was 5 newsletters, including myself, or I was the 6th one. I forget. But we each put in $100. So the winner of this giveaway got $500.
Cash?
So each of us, I forget how it was. I think it was PayPal. Oh, okay. Yeah, cash.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Not even like an Amazon gift card. Just like here's some cold hard transferred cash.
So we each promoted this in our newsletter and said you got, I'm forgetting all the details. It could have been 2 prizes. I don't remember. But I remember at the time I ended up with 294 subscribers, I think it was. 165 of those are still subscribed to my newsletter. And we are...
It's over half?
Long? Yes. Okay, so there's still, the open rate for these people is still at 34.7%, which isn't great, but it's not bad.
34% isn't too bad for, I'd say, people who signed up on a giveaway.
And this was 18 months ago.
Wow.
20 months ago. And so there's still 165 of them. So I paid $100. So that's pretty good. Oh my God, are we ending this spicy episode with the one that I would normally say, don't ever do this? And I'm like, yeah, it's great. So normally I would say, yes, make sure it's super relevant. You're giving away 6 months to Beehive or 6 months to Kit or something super related to what I talk about, which is growing your email list. However, I did not do that, but it still worked out okay. And I think it's because the creators that I partnered with were all quote unquote building in public. Like we were all in the same space. The people who followed us were very interested in growing an audience and a newsletter. So I think it worked out pretty well.
Yeah.
I'd actually be interested to see how many of those other newsletter, like the other creators, like if they're seeing similar results.
Do you know if they're even still publishing the newsletters?
I know one of them sold their newsletter,
Okay.
Christian. I'll have to reach out and see.
Could be an interesting conversation. I think there's definitely a way to incentivize it, like you said, 6 months free to Beehive, or Kit or whatever platform, or even like if you have a paid tier. I mean, like an incentive could be like a free annual membership or something like that, or 50% off, whatever. Like you could definitely be creative with how you want to structure it, but as long as it's like super focused on your newsletter and your content that you're creating, then it would make a lot more sense. $100 cash. I mean, that is driving the wrong incentives. Sign up so you can get money.
So good.
I love it. We live and learn.
Could you tell I was a newsletter newbie at this point?
I mean, at least you partnered with people to do it. That was smart. Collaborating, building relationships. So that was probably the biggest benefit out of all of it.
Yeah, for sure. That is not how I thought we were going to end that section there. I was like, oh, giveaways, definitely not. Then I was like, wait, let me look up my results.
Sometimes the results aren't what we expect. So I would have said, do not do giveaways. But you've proven me wrong, Chenell. You've proven me wrong. Maybe it can work.
Yes.
Maybe it can work. If your content is as good as yours and you're willing to pay $500 for subscribers, so I mean, then you could definitely go about it.
For sure.
There's probably more topics we could talk about here, but why don't we wrap it at that? And I don't know about you, but I'd love to hear what people have to think about these topics, because I'm sure there's people on both sides of the fence for a lot of these things. So definitely inviting people to kind of call us out on a few things or share your feedback with us on what you thought about some of these topics or what your experience is with some of these topics.
Yeah. And if we get, let's say, like 50 comments on YouTube or something, we'll do another one of these episodes. We'll just curate more of these spicy takes and maybe bring some other people on to share their ideas around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Put your spicy takes in the comments. Absolutely. Please.